Hello and welcome to another BASI live Q&A. This time we're going to be focusing on ski fitness with BASI. I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping things before we start. If you've been on one of these before, sorry for teaching you to suck eggs, but on the right hand side of your screen, you'll see a questions box. At any point during the session, just stick your questions in there. We're going to pause periodically throughout the presentation to try and answer some of them, and then we'll answer more at the end as well. So our presenter tonight is Tom Waddington. I'm going to hand over to Tom. He's going to run through a bit of a presentation and introduce himself a bit further.
Hello, everybody. Hello. This is the first time I've done this without interaction on Microsoft Teams. So hopefully I don't feel like I'm talking to myself too much, but we'll give it a go. I thought about doing a more of an interactive one where maybe I'm going to do some exercises and stuff, but I thought that also might be quite hard just on Microsoft Teams. So a little presentation tonight on ski fitness, and just going to take you through some slides really. It's quite general, but I think some key points and or aims for the session are to set you up to be ready to fit to ski, and we'll talk about what fit to ski means, and to give you some ideas and suggestions to create your own program. I think a lot with this, there's no magic wand, you know. It's a lot on you to be able to go away, take this information, and then commit to a fitness program for skiing. So hopefully this presentation gives you some ideas. The next point, the world of fitness is big and it can be conflicting. I'm no expert, but it's just to give you my thoughts, my experience. I've been doing this a long time. Right. Yeah, it's just to give you some thoughts from my experience, what I've seen over the years, what works from working with different people. Another point is to recognize that we're all different, that there are basic principles to skiing and being fit to ski, but we need to apply that to the individual. So I don't know who you are, who's attending this, so I actually don't know your injury history, your strength levels, your access to equipment, your skiing ability. There's so much I don't know, but we'll look at some basic principles that hopefully you'll be able to take away. We'll also look at some common mistakes, just from my experience, from talking with people, what you don't want to be doing or where people go wrong, and then a chance for questions. Maybe we can make it more interactive. If you do have a question as we're going along, we might be able to answer it as we go along, but definitely we'll have a space for questions at the end. All right, so introducing myself. I actually, before I got into skiing, I qualified as a PT. I come from a rugby background and did strength and conditioning, Olympic lifting, that kind of thing. But then I went through the BASI system, and I was never a racer. I was a holiday skier until I did a gap course. But once I'd kind of done my Eurotest and finished my level 4, I really wanted to get into coaching and ski racing. So actually, a few years later, I went down to New Zealand, where I got a FIS license and competed down in New Zealand as a 30-year-old FIS racer, which was really fun and a valuable experience. I learned a lot about what it's like to be more on the athlete spectrum. And when I was down there, I actually worked with Dave Rydin. Back then, he was on the Europa Cup, and it was an amazing experience. I spent a month with them. I became Dave's training partner in the gym and learned a lot about skiing and coaching with him, and a lot about fitness and fitness for skiing. That's us in the gym there on the right. And it was amazing. So, and then the summer after, they asked me to come and help them in Saas-Fee. So we did a full summer pre-season training on the glacier in Saas-Fee, and again we were training hard, and I learned a lot of things. And we also went up to the Institute of Sport in Stirling, where we did a lot of fitness testing with Dave, with some really high level guys, and that was very interesting. More recently in my career, I've been very interested in the body and how the biomechanics works and how our joints move in space and time. And I've done some work with someone called Gary Ward, who is really into how the foot works with the rest of the body, and how that if we're not moving well as we do basic things like walking, that actually might set us up to injury, wear and tear. And he very much looks, I've done some courses with him where you're sort of looking at the human body and looking at where it doesn't move well and how the joints work together. So I find that stuff really interesting, and I'm still learning. I'm still putting things into practice. Yeah, so a little bit about me. Moving on. What does fitness actually mean? You've probably heard, oh, that person's really fit. You know, oh, that person's super fit. He runs marathons. But what does it mean? I think it's a big, broad subject, and that word can cover a lot of things. If we took, for example, if you looked at a marathon runner, they may be super fit cardiovascularly, but they may not have so much power or strength. If you took a bodybuilder, they may concentrate on aesthetics there, and they may look really good, and they do a lot of muscle isolation to grow the muscles, but it may not be that those muscles work that well with each other, and they may not be that ready for a complex sport. I'm not saying some may be, but I think often in the world of fitness, we see people looking good on Instagram and stuff like that, and we assume that's someone who's really fit. For me, fitness is being able to use all of these things and apply them, so we're conditioned for our sport. So it's specific, and if we look at a sport like skiing, it's a very complicated sport we're going downhill fast, lots of we're resisting gravity, we're moving in different directions, so we're going to need lots of these elements like strength, power, core strength, speed, balance coordination, mobility, agility. I like to think a lot of it as moving well in 3 dimensions. because that's what we do in skiing, and that's what we do in a lot of human movement. When you can do that and you're strong, then you become robust and you become injury resistant. So that's even better for us as skiers. And we're then able to, when we go skiing, we're able to spend more time developing the skill of the sport. So fitness, to come back to it, fitness can mean lots of different things, but for me it's specific. Okay, so moving on, what does the research say? So we've got a load of text here. I did some work quite a long time ago now, where a lot of the content was used for the old common theory that you used to have to do for ISIA. And looking at a lot of studies, a lot of journals and studies, we can see these points. So the first one there, elite alpine skiers were assessed in terms of their physiological profiles, and it revealed the importance of muscular strength, anaerobic power, anaerobic endurance, aerobic endurance, coordination, agility, balance, flexibility. So lots of different things. Competition alpine skiers have aerobic demands of 90 to 95% of maximal aerobic power, and maximal heart rate is often achieved. Physiology of alpine skiing. Bosco found that there was a correlation between explosive power, speed, endurance, anaerobic power, strength, and the ability to perform continuous jumps while maintaining your back correctly. And the correlation was with alpine skiing ability. In a study called Characteristics of National, Divisional and Club Male Alpine Ski Racers, they found that what distinguishes better skiers is not VO2 max. This is an interesting one. So VO2 max is the max amount of aerobic capacity, the max amount you use oxygen to convert into energy. But it was actually muscular power, anaerobic endurance, and jump ability. So we'll come on to some of those things later. But many club skiers have the same VO2 max as Olympians, but they would benefit from training programs designed to develop leg strength, power, and anaerobic endurance, which is an interesting point. Another study investigated relative energy contribution to skiing, and they found that it involves a 65% contribution from the anaerobic system, so without oxygen, and suggested that force production and neuromuscular coordination should remain the focus of training. Eccentric work increases your ability to resist the forces in turn and control your edges. Okay. So eccentric work is kind of lengthening the muscle under load, and we'll come on to that. Another study found that hamstring quadricep strength ratios to be almost equal among world champion skiers, indicating good controlling hamstring strength relative to power producing quadriceps activity. However, lower level athletes, so not world champions, were found to have a poor ratio between the two muscle groups, which are mainly used in a ski term. So there'll be no more big slides with lots of text on as we move on, I promise. But I think it was important, you know, that there are a lot of the science points towards some of the stuff we'll talk about. So moving on. What do we require as skiers, instructors taking exams? So I think it's important to note those studies were with alpine ski racers, so professional ski racers. And I think that that's a slightly different thing to what we do as ski instructors, taking exams. You know, if you're a professional athlete, you're on a 3-year periodized program. You've got loads of time. You've got all the money, the coaches, to be able to train full time. You know, but we might not necessarily have that as ski instructors, or really need the level that professional alpine ski racers need to have. So what do we actually need to do? And I kind of thought these are some key points here. If you're skiing in, let's say in your BASI exams and you're skiing down, you're doing short turns, most runs are sort of 15 to 20 seconds. And we need to be able to do that with short rests on the lift, and short intervals. We need to move well from outside ski to outside ski. How many times have you heard that? And make constant adjustments with our body to remain balanced and centered. Okay, so if we need those things, what is the key? What is the key? Now, for me, especially if you're just getting into this world, or looking at improving, one of the best ways you can improve is developing your strength, and more strength. And I think that's often neglected, or perhaps people don't go about it in the right way. So getting into a strength program is key, especially leg strength. Power to weight ratio. I think that this is often not talked about that much, and it's really, you know, what's the relation of how much power can you produce to your weight. So if we took, for example, you see the really strong men or power lifters, who may be 120, 130 kilograms, those guys are super powerful, but only in very short spaces, or just moving a weight up and down. So we need to be able to carry our weight over distance and time. So we want more called strength endurance, and power endurance. So finding out what is your power to weight ratio is I think really important. Something when I was racing in New Zealand, I was pretty strong. I was squatting 180 kilograms, something like that. But I was also pretty heavy. I think I was maybe 103, 104 kilograms. So that didn't actually work out too well for me in a 50-60 gate slalom course, because by the end I was absolutely knackered. I was all right for maybe the first 10, 20 gates, but at the end I couldn't carry that weight and keep producing the same amount of power all the way down. So important to look at if you're perhaps carrying excess weight. That could be an easy way to, if you got lighter, it might be an easier way to increase your power to weight ratio, but also working on strength and power to essentially become stronger is another way of getting a better power to weight ratio, or relative force production. Periodized programming, sorry I spelled that wrong, I think, is something that is absolutely key. From my experience, instructors or people who have a summer training plan and they do a little bit of this, go on a run, maybe do a bit of circuit training, but they have no real set plan over, let's say you have a period of 3 months, you've got a week block of training, you've got a diary, you can measure your training in that week, and then you can measure progress, and you stick to that plan, and then you can increase your, for example, the amount you lift within 3 months by quite a lot, and you can increase your strength and therefore power by quite a lot. But if you're just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, no structure, no way to measure, I think that's where people can go wrong. So periodized programming. 3 planes of movement. So we have the sagittal plane, which is up, down. And then we have the frontal plane, which is side to side. So this way, we're looking at the frontal plane. Sagittal plane would be looking at me going down and up. Frontal plane is side to side. And then transverse plane, which is rotational, so being able to turn. And I think it's very important that a ski fitness program works a lot in these different planes, because as we ski, we work in these planes all the time. And often sometimes in programs, you might see a lot of people favoring exercises, working a lot in the sagittal plane, the up-down plane, but maybe not so much in the side-side rotational planes. And I think that that's really important, because if you're just in one dimension and you're doing a lot of training in that dimension, and then you ask the body to move under load, let's say when we're skiing, very quickly in all dimensions, if you think about a GS turn or something like that, we're moving side to side, we've got a rotational with our upper body, and we're managing the mass along the length of the ski. So we're working on all three planes, and there may be big forces involved in that. I think one study showed that you can create up to 3 times 3 Gs, so 3 times your body weight in skiing, and maybe for the downhill guys, maybe even more. And so if you ask your body to move quickly in a different plane, if you're not strong over that over that area, you're more susceptible to injury, or not being able to perform that well. Unilateral leg strength and ankle strength, I think, are very important, and it just means being strong on one leg and the other leg. So not just both legs together, but being able to move from one leg to the other, and strong in that. And I think we're in ski boots, so a lot of people don't actually think about the ankle, but I think that's where everything starts, and the kinetic chains, the flexor extensor chains up your body start, and making sure that our dry land off snow programs focus on ankle strength is really important. You still use your ankle a lot in skiing. If you think about the moguls pushing down and up, we're still using a lot of ankle strength, and if your ankle isn't strong, that connection to the rest of the body can be affected. Yeah. So, and then eccentric strength. So as the the muscle lengthens. We need to be able to have strength under load. So those for me are very key points to take into a program for the summer, perhaps. Some common mistakes. Kind of mentioned it in the last slide, but if you're not periodizing your programming, so you're not looking at it as a progression over the next 3 months and just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, that's a mistake. Making sure that you've got good programming, and we'll go on to that on some of the next slides, and that you're following the principles of FIT, which is frequency, intensity, time, and type. So making sure that you're progressively loading, you're not trying to move up the weights too quickly if we're working on a strength program, or you're doing too much too quickly. Yeah. People who have a low priority for strength and intramuscular coordination. So intramuscular means, you know, the big compound movements and making sure that all of our muscles work together up the chains and they know how to work with each other. If you're doing too much bodybuilding or you know, isolation exercises, often the muscles don't get a chance to work together. They may grow, they may get bigger, but they don't work together. So making sure that that's a priority is key, and often a common mistake if you don't do enough of that. Too much too quick. I think I've seen a lot of people who leave it till 2 weeks before they're going off skiing for the season, or even a month before, and they're trying to do loads of stuff. They're doing loads of HIIT workouts and trying to increase the strength really quickly, putting on loads of weight too quickly, and you just open yourself up to injury, to muscle imbalances, and a lot of things like that. So make sure that you start now, because that is key for if we're talking about next season, making sure that we start a program now. Bad technique, I think, is another one. Making sure that if you're not just going and doing random exercises, no one's really looking at you. If, let's say, you were skiing and you always want feedback if you wanted to improve. So sometimes in the gym, people are going and they're not really looking at their skill in the gym or how they move when they're doing an exercise. And I think that often means that people have bad technique, once again, susceptible to injury, muscle imbalances. So if you're not that experienced with exercise or strength training, making sure that you spend some time, maybe a bit of money. The amount of people that spend loads of money on new kit, new skis, new boots, but actually, if you maybe invested a little bit of that money into a personal trainer or a fitness professional and really got into some good technique, I think that would be more beneficial for developing technical ski performances. Often on Instagram, you see people doing the splits and big, huge ranges, and actually sometimes being over flexible is not a good thing. Flexibility is sort of passive stretching of the muscle, but what we want is strength over the range of movement that we need for skiing. So there's a different thing there. If we're just training our muscles to stretch all the time passively, and look for huge ranges of movement within the joints, I don't think that's realistic to skiing. Actually, what we want to be able to do is look at our big joints and see how well they move and how well we can actually be mobile at some points when we need to be, but also how well we can stabilize those joints when we need to. All right, moving on. So some key strength exercises. Sorry, my battery's just running out, so I'm just going to plug it in. Some key strength exercises. Basic. We've got so many exercises that we can do. I've picked these out. And these would be great ones to include in a program. And we're going to put some links in at the end. I've got a YouTube channel where it would go through some of these exercises, not all of them. So you can have a look, and it's kind of me talking and explaining how to do them. So we've got multi-directional lunges, squat, single leg deadlift, pistol squat, assisted hamstring Nordics, hamstring bridges, pull-ups, bent over rows, kettlebell shoulder press. I'm not going to explain every one of them. It's probably better you have a little look and research them, or watch some videos, or talk to a personal trainer and ask about these exercises and how to do them. Moving on to some more advanced ones. We've got things like front squat. Dragon squat's a very good one that also includes mobility. Multi-directional step-ups, so working in different planes and stepping up onto a box. Med ball throws, weighted jumps, weighted pistol squats, speed skater jumps, side-side, Nordics. A lot of these exercises are covering the big muscle groups and working that intramuscular coordination that we need for skiing. Moving on.
So Tom, we've got a wee question from Ian that might be relevant to this. So he's asking, what sort of exercise would you suggest for building ankle strength?
Yeah, good question. Good question, Ian. I think things like the hamstring bridge with an ankle raise is really good, and that I can put a link to that exercise in the video. But it's a lot of making sure that you use the ball of the foot and engage the. I'm just going to try and show you. So we're making sure that we can use the front of the foot and engage the posterior chain there. So that's a good one. I would also suggest just simple box jumps. So if you've got a box, not very high, and one-legged box jumps onto the box. But the key is that you're not just jumping with a flat foot onto the box, because then we're not using our ankle. We need to jump onto the balls of our feet and hold that position as we jump up and back down. That's a really good one. There are lots of different exercises out there, and like I say, we'll put some videos on that talk about that. I hope that's okay. It's hard for me to explain all the exercises, but so the core strength is often thrown around, fashionable word. Got to have good core, strong core. I like to think of the core as being mobile and strong. So whereas some people say, "Oh, I've got a stable core," I think the core is that it's connecting the upper body and the lower body, and it needs to be able to move well to connect all our joints so we can move well in sport. And it's kind of the crossroads of the body. And it's not just doing sit-ups. In fact, a lot of the strength exercises you do, like a squat or a deadlift or a medicine ball throw, is they also include it's a lot of core work. So core definitely moves a long way away from just doing sit-ups, and I like to try and train core with my whole body. So making sure that I'm connected from the foot to the upper body. And you've got so many different muscles in the core. You've got your deep muscles. I can't even pronounce some of them. You've got middle muscle layers, outer muscle layers. It's not just the front. We've got all the back here. It's like a tin can going around with lots of different layers. Some of my favorites there are medicine wall ball throws, Copenhagen plank, T-spine rotations, so thoracic spine, Pallof press. Those ones kind of use the whole body from the foot, so they're good ones. So it's important to think in a training program that we're developing core all the time. I think all the time with most of the exercises we're doing. Plyometrics and power. So strength and strength training is a precursor to power. So in general, the stronger we are, the more power we can produce. Plyometrics is it's a good way to focus on the stretch cycle of the muscles, the quick stretch, quick power, force, and it helps the muscle reach its maximal strength in a short space of time. So they kind of came from sprinting and track athletes, but as skiers they can be really useful. And there's a reason why people like Alan Baxter and Ingmar Stenmark have won the Superstars competition. Did anyone ever see that? Oh, I can't ask questions, can I? But anyway, they're good all-round athletes, very powerful athletes, and in a lot of times they won that competition, which is a competition where different athletes do different sports. And plyometrics is something to consider in your training program. And it's basically jumping, but making sure that you're doing that correctly. There's a lot of people that warn against plyometrics until you've got a good base in strength. So making sure that we're not doing big depth jumps, which is a form of plyometrics, if you're not ready to do that, because you're creating a lot of load and trying to use that very quickly. So in avoidance of injury, making sure that whoever you are, you're ready to be able to do plyometrics. And you can do some very light plyometrics, side stair hops, small hops, multi-directional jumps, and definitely as skiers we want to look at that multi-dimension training within plyometrics. Cool. Developing our cardiovascular and anaerobic capacity. Lots of different ways we can do this. I could talk about this subject for another hour. I think it's important to note that when we're doing this, for me anyway, I think it's good to choose an exercise that's relatively simple, because when we get into fatigue levels, if you're doing a complicated exercise and working within interval training, I think it can leave you susceptible to injury. So if we're going to go into interval training to develop cardiovascular and anaerobic capacity, we might want to look at sprinting, rowing machine, jump squats, boxing, jumping from side to side over a small hurdle, Dave Ryden's favourite. And there's so many different ways you can do that. Tabata intervals is 20 seconds of all out work with 10 seconds rest, and you do that for 8 sets, and that's been proved to be a really good way to develop your CV and anaerobic capacity pretty quickly. But you can play around with it, but what's important is that the combinations sort of work to above 70% of maximal effort for the exercise period. So making sure that you're going for it above 70% for 30 seconds, and then having an active rest, so walking or light jogging. And there a suggestion is performing interval training 3 times a week, and then increasing the intensity as the weeks progress. Important to note that I would put a strength training program, and if you're a beginner, into that, add in extra interval training on top of that might be a little bit too much for the first month or two. So actually focusing on strength for a month, making sure you've got good recovery, and then starting to add some more interval training, cardiovascular work, anaerobic work into the program. All right. So going back to the start, I think, it's important. I don't know who you are. I don't know your experience. This might be an example of a leg strength session on Monday. And we might want to work within a percentage of what's called a 1 rep max. So that's the maximum amount of weight you can lift in 1 repetition. So maybe you can squat 100 kilograms. So that means you might want to work between 60 and 80%. So between 60 and 80 kilograms with 5 sets, 4 to 6 repetitions of that. And then the same principles apply to the rest of the exercises there. Important that you would keep a diary of this training program, and then maybe you look to small increases in weight over a month, over 3 months. So the following week you might just go to more reps, see how it's feeling. You may want to add a few more kilograms on if you're feeling good. And this is a suggestion of how a good rep range, a good set range to improve strength. If you're a complete beginner, you may want to go on the lower end and maybe do more repetitions, so up to 10, 15 repetitions, just to get used to the exercise, a lighter weight, and building that up. So yeah, there we go. In complete beginner, some of this might just be getting to know the exercises, using your body weight. So yeah, that is an example of Monday's session. I just thought, to gym or not to gym, I thought I'd put this in there. For instructors, you might be bored or you might not like going to a gym, so you don't have to go to a gym actually. And there are loads of different things we can do. There's a lot of ways to increase strength with just body weight exercises. We can get some really cheap equipment, a kettlebell, one kettlebell, some resistance band. You can go and use stairs and do a lot of exercises. Find a set of stairs somewhere. You can go and find a hill, do sprints somewhere. Medicine ball, another cheap thing, and there are so many exercises we can do with a medicine ball, making sure we're playing sport. But I still think it's important. It might be a little harder to measure progress, but it's important that if we're not using a gym, that we've still got to be able to have this in a periodized program. So maybe it's, right, I'm doing hill sprints on Tuesday and Friday. I'm going to do 10 sprints, see how I am with some rest in between. That kind of thing. So making sure that we've also got a program for a non-gym fitness improvement. And it's important to note, playing sport within your week, I think, is one of the best ways you can develop agility, coordination, hand-eye coordination. So learning a new sport, picking up an old sport, and putting that into a week's training program. Maybe you want to do sports like basketball, tennis, squash, hockey, sports that move in lots of directions, use different energy systems. So going into sprinting and aerobic. I think it's great to be able to do those in the summer as well. Mobility versus flexibility. This is often a big area of confliction and talk and different evidence. I think, I mentioned it earlier, flexibility is defined as the ability of a muscle or muscle groups to lengthen passively through a range of motion, whereas mobility is the ability of a joint to move actively through a range of motion. So I think that there we look at, well, what is the range of motion on a joint? What's the range available to us, and how well do our joints move within that range? And so not huge end ranges. And actually, if you look at the hip or the rib cage and the spine and how well they interact with each other is a big thing, and it's a big subject and probably too much for me to go into now. I've got quite a few videos that will explain mobility and looking at how your body moves and how these big joints interact with each other, starting at the foot. But often people might be able to move with big ranges in one way. So if I've got my hip, I might be able to tilt it that way really well, but actually not tilt it this way that well. And how does that affect how I move with my rib cage and vice versa? So looking at functional ranges of movement and how joints work together, I think, is important, and not just looking at doing the splits. Moving on. So this is a little example of a week's training program, where more designed towards the beginner, where we might do Monday a leg strength session, Tuesday rest, Wednesday upper body and core, Thursday basic plyometrics, interval training, Friday leg strength and interval training, Saturday playing a sport, Sunday rest. And then you would want to put that into a month's program. You have your individual sessions, like we looked at Monday's leg strength session, making sure you record it all and that you're seeing progression and improvement. I don't know who you are, so once again, this is just an example. Might be different. You might want more strength sessions in there, but it's important that it's structured and that we've got strength work in there. Moving on. So, to conclude, I think that I've probably said it enough times, but make sure you have a plan. Start now if it's next season. Use a diary, record your sessions, get advice from a professional, put some money into that, making sure you're looking at technique and how to do exercises properly. Make sure that we stick to small increments, progressive overload, not going too much too quickly, making sure that you stick to it, making sure that you just keep going, keep training. There's no magic wand. Strength often doesn't happen so quickly, so making sure we stick to it, keep going with the program, and you'll see improvements. Make sure that your program has a range of 3-dimensional exercises and that we're not just sticking to one plane of movement. And then finally, this is another topic we could spend another few hours on, but good nutrition and sleep are the best recovery tools. So making sure that you're eating well, healthy foods, lots of nutrients in them, and that you're getting some good rest. There we go. So finished. Any questions, Donald?
Yeah, so I think we've had a few come through, but feel free to add more in now. Anyone that's wanting to have questions. So another one from Ian, I think carrying on from the ankle strength question earlier. He's suggesting a single leg squat on a ball of foot with a turned BASI. Would that be good strength?
I think so. I think probably on a BASI, you might have like eversion, inversion of the ankle, so that kind of balance there. But what I'd want to see also is the ability to keep the heel. Can you see that?
That's
so be able to keep the heel off the ground in a lot of movements, so we can do that plantar flexion type of movement there.
We've got another question from Riza. What exercises do you recommend for increased agility, especially for older skiers?
I think stuff like SAQ training, and if you Google SAQ, there are a lot of stuff you can do with ladders, which are the things you kind of put on the string you put on the floor, and there are loads of different drills that are quite light to do, and you can do different little toe taps, moving from side to side, little jumps within the ladders. I think that would be a really good thing to do, to help with agility, moving well. Maybe taking up a sport like tennis, being able to move from side to side, sprint, stop, go back, I think is a good one. In terms of exercises, in the gym, you might want to look at like speed skater exercises. I think they're really good to help just body weight, jumping from side to side. good exercises there. Just thinking off the top of my head, but good question.
And a question from Rosemary here. How important do you think it is that ski instructor internships such as level 1 and level 2 gap courses include fitness, as some of them don't?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think sometimes doing fitness in a gap course, if you're not prepared and not ready, might be too much. So if you're skiing all day and then you're asked to do a fitness session in the evening, it could be overload. You know, if you're not prepped or you've done no physical preparation, that could be too much. But if you are fit and strong and ready to go, that could be a good way of maintenance. So I guess it kind of depends on your ability and fitness level, and what you've been doing in the day. I certainly know if I've been skiing moguls all day, I probably won't be doing much of a fitness session in the evening.
That probably ties us quite well into the next question from James. He says, I find it hard through the winter to maintain strength while skiing. Have you got any advice for that?
Yeah, that is a good question. I do as well. And I think that it's very hard, especially if you're skiing hard in the day, to maintain strength. I like to just dial it back a little bit, go a little bit lighter, work more plyometric based, which I don't think is as intense. You can recover quicker from plyometrics, so I put a lot more jumping into my routines, and I also try to do any strength work maybe before a day off. So if I finished on a Friday, I might try and do some lower leg strength stuff on a Friday if I know I've got maybe Saturday, Sunday off. So I try and be a little bit clever with the programming. But if you're skiing hard, I think it's very hard to make any strength gains. Making sure that you're doing low level maintenance, plyometrics, more jumping based stuff is a suggestion.
Cool. And another one here. Any recommendations for getting back into a training program after an injury?
Yes. I think it depends what injury. I think it's quite a hard question to answer without too much knowledge. But I think it's really important that you're very careful around what you do and making sure you're working with physio, with fitness professionals, so that you can monitor how well you're doing with the injury. But I think starting off slow and light is a good thing to do. But often I think with injuries, people avoid training, which is the wrong way to go. I think actually training is really good for injuries and can help make you stronger and protect where you were once injured. A lot of with an injury as well is the brain works to protect it. So you may want to look around the one-sided unilateral stuff, because the brain will sometimes want to avoid the injury, and maybe you weight bear more on one side. That if you say you did your right knee ACL, you may weight bear more on your left. So I think that's where not just training on 2 feet can help to see how well individual legs are doing, for example.
Cool. And a question here from Ian. What power to weight ratio would you build up in terms of barbell squats to have the strength to perform at ISIA, ISTD level versus competing?
Good question, Ian. I think All right, so Dave Ryden, he can squat 190, and I think he's around 72 kilograms. So there you're looking at a good athlete power to ratio, kind of top end athlete. I think for ice skiers, I think 1.5 of body weight. So if you were 100 kilograms, you would hopefully be able to squat 150 barbell squat 150s. It's kind of a good ratio. But then you've got to look at the things like, well, is that just one squat? How well can you carry that weight, maybe over 20 turns? So looking at actually jumping from side to side with just your body weight is another suggestion. 1 minute jump from side to side and see how you get on there in your sort of muscle lactate to strength ratio, if that makes sense.
Cool. I think we'll probably do one more question. I'm aware we've gone a couple of minutes over, and then we'll probably call it a night. So the last question we have here is from James. Any good exercises for lower back strength?
Lower back strength. Yes, I think a lot of actually the leg strength stuff that you do, like Romanian deadlifts, are really big on lower back. So I think basing training programs all around that is a good one. There are another good one is the Nordics. So it's a hamstring exercise, but I think that also brings into the lower back where this is your lower limbs and you're lowering down. Someone's holding your legs and you're lowering down. I think all leg strength exercises where you're working posterior chain, so the calves, hamstring, glutes, also work the lower back. So I think that they're really good exercises. Yeah. Perfect.
So I think we've managed. Oh, there's one more question there, actually, Tom, if you don't mind.
Yep. No problem.
I do a lot of hiking in the summer, but find it still very hard to ski at higher altitude, 3,000 plus. Any advice on VO2 maximizing, please?
Yeah. I think maybe hiking, you may be at like a more aerobic capacity. So, I would take the intensity up a little bit with the activity and look at shorter interval training, where you're going up to 80% of maximum heart rate and you're really working super intense for a short period, 30 seconds, something like that, then a short rest, and then going again, doing that. If you want to do that in hiking, for example, you could get a weighted vest or get a really big rucksack and actually just up the ascent rate. So you could even do interval training with hiking and add some weight in a rucksack and try to split that into walking really fast for a minute, little breather, walk really fast again for a minute, and see how you get on with more of an interval based working towards maximal heart rate.
Cool. Well, I think that's us covered all the questions. So I'll just sort of finish by saying thanks very much, Tom. I mean, there's lots of really good information in this presentation, lots that you can think about for the summer training program that you'll all be putting together now, I'm sure. I've popped the links to some of the videos that Tom's talking about at the top of the chat there, so you'll be able to access them and see some of the exercises and some of the things Tom's been talking about in the presentation. And finally, this has been recorded, and we'll make the recording available soon after tonight. So if you want to go back and look at it, or you've got friends that missed tonight's session, they'll just be able to go to the same page that you found the join link for here, and they'll find the recording there. So I think that's us. So again, yeah, thank you very much, Tom, and we'll see you next time.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.